There were a lot of theorists conjecturing on what would happen in Game of Thrones. An insane amount. So many theories. This Bridge 4 guy had some crazy predictions about Jon Snow healing the Night's King. Grey Area was saying all this stuff about Bran needing to kill the Night's King and trap his soul in a weirwood tree or something. And then all the theories about Bran being the Night's King and Jon Snow becoming the next Night's King or whatever. None of them turned out to be true at all. They all failed hard. Now here is my theory as to why Game of Thrones theories in general failed. Game of Thrones uses the fantasy of what we want to happen to distract us from what is likely to happen. We fantasised about the Honourable Robb Stark getting revenge on the King of Gits, Joffrey Baratheon, but we forgot that the Lannisters had more wealth, a bigger army, the option of fighting dirty, and control of the capital. We wanted Stannis to mount Ramsay's head on a spike, but by that stage his army was largely depleted, relying on mercenaries. He had no allies, and he was fighting an offensive war in terrible, cold conditions. We wanted Oberyn to beat the Mountain, and just when it looked like he was about to, he got his head squished. We wanted something more from the great evil, the Night's King, but in truth maybe the Night's King was more effective at achieving his goals, just not in a very cinematic way. It wasn't the original attack that was so destructive, but rather the knock-on effects on Daenerys. The destruction he caused in the battle, plus driving Daenerys crazy, may have been the best way for him to attempt to achieve his goals. George R.R. Martin seems to love to set up something highly fantastical and then to surprise with something highly realistic. The gap between expectations and reality can hurt. If George R.R. Martin had written the Rocky movies, Rocky would have been knocked out in the first round by Apollo Creed. It would be disappointing, but ultimately quite real. Nowhere is this more embodied than in Daenerys' character arc. An idealist draped in fantasy, perhaps she was destined to fail when reality caught up to her. Her anime Dragon Ball Z powers were likely to cause immense destruction to the average person. We loved Game of Thrones not because it subverted expectancies, but because it was a fantasy that subverted fantasy itself. All the theories seem to fail to take this obvious point into account, and so epically fail.